This is the Business Stuff Podcast. This is where I will share the lessons I've learned from advising thousands of businesses over almost 30 years. Each episode will give you practical insight to allow you to learn from other people's mistakes. I'll be pulling in experts from our team and the world of business, and together we'll make sure your business is giving you what you want. My name is Martin, and this is the Business Stuff Podcast. Hi, and welcome back to the next episode of Business Stuff. I'm Martin, and this is Jack. Hi, Jack. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Martin. How are you?
I'm good, Jack. We're talking about a curious topic here, which we think is actually letting gremlins into the system. This is our third attempt to record this. Jack, which saboteur is messing with us here? We've got plenty to choose from.
Certainly is. Yeah. I mean, maybe it doesn't quite fit into the topic because we're talking about self-sabotage, and I don't feel like we're sabotaging this unless I'm unconsciously unplugging the router or something like that. I was going to say,
maybe we are self-sabotaging here. But the topic is self-sabotage. And very briefly, we've got 9 different types of self-sabotage, which we're going to talk about briefly today. And they're controlled by the chief saboteur, aren't they, Jack? Do you want to tell us who that is first? And we'll start there.
Yeah, so the master saboteur, as it is this persona called the judge. And I'm sure everyone can resonate with this persona. It's the one that's kind of always in your head, always. Basically, it's where all of your self-doubt comes from. It's the voice in your head telling you that you're not good enough and you've done stuff wrong, and kind of reminds you of all of those mistakes you've made, the one that wakes you up in the middle of the night with that embarrassing story that happened in middle school and stuff like that. But it's the one that's constantly there and judging you, and also judging others as well, comparing yourself against other people. So that, I'm sure that's something that everyone has experienced in their life at least once, but it's something that I certainly deal with quite a lot. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's got those self-doubts, those things that just drop into your mind from nowhere for no reason, and you're never quite sure why. But it's possible that it's the judge here, isn't it? Just reminding you not to get too big for your boots, I suppose. Is that one way to just keep pulling you back a little bit? But he doesn't work alone, does he? And it's not actually him who does the damage. Is that fair to say?
No, he's almost he's the puppet pulling the strings, and he basically pulls in his accomplices to which potentially that they see will do the most damage to you at any one moment. So these nine accomplices are the ones that actually do the damage themselves.
Is it worth going through those 9 then, just in order then, Jack? And I know a lot of these feel very similar, and there is a bit of overlap in these, isn't there? But let's start first. I don't know who you've got on your list first, but do you want to pick the first saboteur that we're going to talk? So think of these as the people that the judge pulls off the bench. They go, I'm going to send in this one first. So who make this end in first?
The manager, as you
will. They're the manager.
So the one that it certainly strikes a chord with me because I've done kind of the diagnostic on it, and this scores quite highly for me. Is this accomplice called the avoider? So it's somebody. It's basically when you're focusing on all of the good stuff going on, all of the exciting things, all the exciting projects you're working on at work, and at the expense of the difficult and the necessary stuff that you need to do. So it's like, I've got all of these exciting jobs that I've got to be working on at the moment, a lot of potential leads that I want to follow, but actually there's also my biggest client, I have to have a really difficult conversation about a bill or about putting my prices up, but I just want to focus on the good stuff because that's what I much prefer. But that's obviously self-sabotaging, because potentially you could be doing some serious damage to your business if you don't have those difficult conversations.
I think I scored quite similar to you in a lot of things. And that of these, that's probably the thing that I would say is my strongest player is the avoider. That's who I see quite often, I think.
Yeah.
Now, and it's interesting now that I've learned about these. You can literally tell when they're in there having a go, can't you? So that's the avoider.
Yeah,
so he's the first one. If he doesn't get you, or she, these people can be whatever you want, I suppose. you've got your own versions of these people, haven't you? But who's next? Who do they send in next if that hasn't worked?
So the next one, we've got the controller. So this is kind of basically an anxiety-led need to basically be in control of everything. You want to do everything on your own terms. You want jobs to be done exactly to your specification. Your team has to work to your way. And when you can't do that, then it kind of leads to those really high anxiety moments, and you get quite impatient. So again, all well and good if you're have the ability to be able to do that and control things. But I think what we've discussed possibly ever since starting this podcast is that there's a lot of things you can't control. So trying to control stuff beyond your control is just, it's like trying to catch water in your hands.
But also you might be desperate to control the actions of your team, but not able to do that. Now, I don't mean in a power capacity, You might be their literal charge. But if you can't encourage those people or engage them or disseminate what you want them to do the right way, no matter how much control you exert over them, they're never going to do what you want them to do anyway, which will just lead to more and more of this anxiety and stress, won't it?
Truly, it's like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're stripping or discouraging autonomy from your team, then the more and more they're reliant they become on you, the more and more control you need to have over them,
because they won't take initiative.
It's just a big ball of anxiety.
It does just create an ever bigger problem, isn't it? So okay. So that's the second one. So what we've got next then?
So the next one, we've got the high achiever, and this is another one which I think we both scored quite highly on, which is you're always dependent on on really good results happening, and that's what you base your self-worth on. So you're always looking for that next win, that big win, which again you're probably going, well, that's not a bad thing, but the problem is that that's how you measure your self-worth. So therefore, when you do get that big win, it becomes meaningless within a day or so, and you're like, well, what's the next thing? So you're really kind of struggling to find fulfillment and contentment with some of the good things you've done.
It's like eating McDonald's, isn't it?
Again,
you're hungry, you have a McDonald's, you're okay for about 4 minutes, then you're hungry again. Is that this is the McDonald's burger of the saboteurs, isn't it? And again, it sounds like we're doing that awful thing where you go, yes, I'm guilty of being a hyper-achiever. This isn't a good thing, is it? This is a bad thing. We're not saying we are hyper-achievers. What we're saying is we're distracted by that, just the win. As soon as the win's gone, we forget it, we move on, we're trying for something else, aren't we? So it's a bad thing, not a good thing.
Yeah, it sounds like it's what you'd answer to what's your biggest weakness in an interview.
My biggest weakness is I have no weaknesses. Yeah.
I'm the hyper of hyper achievers. But yeah, I mean that it's also difficult with particularly when you're offering a service to someone, for example, is that you have somebody who goes out and wins the work, fantastic, and then they immediately lose interest like that. But then you're actually lost interest before you've even started providing the service to them. And how can you provide a good service to someone if you're already looking for the next thing and you're like, I'm not interested in that anymore, sorry.
Yeah.
But your client's still interested. They're like, brilliant, you gave me fantastic kind of sales service. I'm really excited to work with you. But you're like, oh yeah, sorry mate, I'm going to go and do something else.
Absolutely. Right, okay then. So that was so 3 down. We've got another 6 to go. So what's next on the list then, Jack?
So the next one is hyper-rational. So this is kind of an intense and exclusive focus on rational processing. And that comes down to things that are actually quite subjective as well. So again, you can be really rational looking at a set of accounts, for example, and where there's data there which is objective. Like that's fantastic. However, you're also trying to then bring that process into more subjective things, like relationships, how you manage your team. You're trying to rationalize everything into something that you can comprehend. And the issue with that is that you ultimately can come across as quite uncaring and unfeeling, and almost a little bit arrogant in kind of your intellectually.
Yeah.
So it's
is that because you could come across as cold then, couldn't you? you've got this
Totally,
feels
yeah.
the opposite end of someone who's an empathetic, active listener. You try to just make everything a binary. Well, it did or it didn't. It's a yes or no. And life isn't like that, is it? Life is more complex. So this can be a problem if you try to seek
nuance.
rationality in people, because people aren't always rational, are they?
We're certainly not, no. As a species, we are not rational at all at times. And yeah, so if you're a manager of a large team, having this kind of hyper-rationality can be quite difficult, and you may struggle to forge those relationships with your team.
Okay, so we've got another hyper coming up next, I think, as well, haven't we, Jack?
Yes, it's another hyper one. So again, it's all kind of extreme stuff, isn't it? But this is a hyper vigilance we're talking about next. So this is when you're incredibly anxious about things that might happen. You're looking ahead and going, this might go wrong, this might go wrong, this might go wrong, and to the point where you can almost paralyze yourself, just through fear of what might happen. And that's obviously not great. If you need to make a decision on something and you're too worried about what might happen, then you don't make a decision. And interestingly, is not making a decision is a decision in itself, and it's generally not always the right decision to make. Funny enough.
Yes, because if you can't choose between path A and path B, and you're stuck not even on a path, that's actually the third choice, isn't it?
Yeah, that's actually path
A
C,
and B
walking
probably
around.
would have been better, but you chose path C, and people don't often realise that. And that this hypervigilance, this constant fear of actually taking a step, making a commitment, could be one of the reasons why you can't go down that road.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's probably been in that position in their career at some point where they think about, do I stay where I am at the moment or do I go? And a lot of people, that can pontificate on that decision for, a number of years, to the point where suddenly, like, blooming heck, I've actually been here for this firm for 30 years, and I'm not sure if I really wish I'd gone somewhere else. But at that point, it's too late. Yeah.
Okay, and so we're kind of halfway in now. Who's next then? So these 5 chaps have kicked us around quite a bit so far, but again, this isn't enough. We've got more to come. Who's next? Who's next to come on? Who's more next onto the pitch here?
So this is probably another one of the ones that I've certainly scored highly in. So we've already talked about the other top 2, but this is probably my third one, which is the pleaser. So it's where you're basically trying to gain acceptance and affection by helping people, and so ultimately it's all well and good when everything's going fantastic and you're giving away your time for free to help somebody, but when things get difficult and suddenly you can't make those same commitments, or suddenly you need to have that conversation about, maybe, well, if you want me to do this, you're going to have to start paying for me or paying more for me. That becomes very difficult for you because it goes against your need to please everyone. And you think, oh my God, they're going to hate me if I ask to put this price up, and maybe they'll leave. So maybe I'll just.
The reason this is a form of sabotage as well is because if all of your actions are to please others, you're losing sight of your own actions here, aren't you? You're neglecting yourself, and you it's like charity begins at home. All of these things, you can only help others if you're strong and fulfilled in the first place, can't you? But this will
definitely,
be a detriment to that.
Over a long period of time, you can start to become resentful because you're putting your needs above everyone else's, and just like, well, what about me? Why does nobody care about me? It was like, well, you don't really care about yourself, so what do you expect from other people? As I said, this is something that kind of resonates quite a lot with me. And actually, if you go away and do the diagnostic, it kind of gives you some, potential roots of why you may be like this, and may stem from your childhood. And again, I'm looking at that going, oh yeah, that actually kind of makes sense. Actually,
to be fair, Jack, I never did agree that you were kept in a cupboard as a child. I don't think we can put all of your issues down to that, but it certainly won't have helped you.
Yeah.
So Potter is definitely a pleaser, you suspect, isn't he? He wants, yeah.
Yeah, an absolute pleaser.
Right, okay then. So I think this next one was on my list. Who is it?
Yes. So yeah, this is certainly where I've seen your scores. This is and obviously knowing you as well.
If you've met me, this makes sense.
So the next one is Restless. So you're always kind of looking for similar to the kind of a high achiever is. You're always looking for the greater excitement or the next thing, the next activity, and you're constantly busy. I mean, that's certainly the case of you. You seem to be doing 1,000 miles an hour. I mean, I suppose like going out for lunch every day with somebody just count as busy, doesn't it?
It's definitely work. I've spent 20 years persuading my wife that that's work. So I'm not having you cast any doubt on that. But yeah, so this Restless thing though is it's not always necessarily about the big win. It's just always looking for something, isn't it? It's like change, just always seeking something new, something exciting, something different. But you know, I'm certainly the kind of person who I couldn't just sit and do a single task for 7 hours. Maybe I could. It's not something I would remotely fancy doing, if I'm honest. So yeah, this is something that definitely gets me.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have that peace and contentment with the current job because you're always looking at the next job.
Apart from this, Jack, of course, I could do this all day. This is,
Oh,
but anyway, yeah, let's get on with the next two. Because
can we hurry up? Well, I'm sure
I've got someone else I want to speak to. So
the last point, I'm sure that our clients will be surprised that you don't actually do all of their tax returns. That there's actually a team behind you that do them, and you're not there slaving away.
I make that clear. Yeah, don't worry. There's no.
And they'll be reassured knowing how restless you are, because otherwise you'll just be filling in.
Wouldn't want me to. That's right. I'm definitely not the next one. That's for sure.
Yes, that brings us quite nicely onto the next one, which is the Stickler, which is basically the complete opposite of probably both of us, where you're after perfectionism constantly, to the point where you're taking too much time. Giving someone a simple task, which you have an idea maybe as a manager to be like, well, it's going to take them 2 or 3 hours to do, but then they're still sat there 2 weeks later working on it. What are you doing? Like, well, it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because perfect is the enemy of good, and good more often than not is more than enough.
Is enough, yeah. Good is enough.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's certainly in our philosophy. I say that we agree on that.
Keeping this in an accountancy kind of angle as well. We talked last week in the podcast about materiality. If you're doing a set of accounts where there's literally 500,000 transactions, the stickler will want to check every dot, every line, every item, everything, and it'll just take forever. So the stickler would set a very low threshold for materiality, in that they would want to check even very small things, and that will then just take them forever. Because if you apply the Pareto principle to most things, you can get 80% of the job done with 20% of the effort. Spending that other 80% of the effort is only incrementally improving the actual output often, isn't it? And the stickler will be the one who's trying to get that, up to 100%, which you can never really achieve, can you?
No. Well, conversely though, if you had someone like, maybe a management accountant or forensic accountant, for example, that's where those stickler kind of skills are really needed. Those
tendencies are actually a bit of an advantage there. You certainly don't want the restless person looking for that last penny, do you?
Certainly not. No, you've given it 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago already on that. That looks about right.
So the final one then is who, Jack? Who's the last of the saboteurs here, and what do they do?
So the last one is called the victim. So this is all about becoming emotionally temperamental, and as a way to gain kind of attention and affection. So you're always focusing on yourself. There's a probably a little bit of a martyr streak in you, like, why is it always happening to me? Why are all these bad things happening? And it's something that I think everyone's got a small amount of, but and people have got better ways of self-containing it. But as as a result, this kind of self-pitying that you've got can obviously hold you back in a lot of places, because it's always difficult to make assumptions, isn't it? But people do make assumptions about you and snap judgments, and it's not always fair, but it can inhibit you as a result. Like if you were going up for a promotion and you were there wallowing there, like there was two candidates, one of them was kind of showing this victim streak while someone else wasn't, then that may make a material effect on their application.
If you had a victim and a pleaser,
probably, well, actually,
if you had a pleaser and a victim sitting in front, the pleaser will be like, "Yeah, I'll do whatever you want. When do you want it? Do you want me to start now? I'm sorry, I haven't already done it." Whereas the victim will be like, I've already done everything. I've earned this job. This is my job. Why aren't you just giving me this job? Can't believe you're interviewing them. And again, a victim working under someone who's hyper rational would be an interesting mix, because the hyper rational would seem cold, disconnected, whereas the victim's like, "But why aren't you listening to me? Why aren't you paying attention?" And it's just,
why aren't all of these problems? Why aren't you fixing them for me?
It's just saboteurs just battling it out against each other most of the day, isn't it?
And that was an interesting example you gave there of the victim versus the pleaser. Is that by making that decision and picking the pleaser, is that you're probably actually worsening both of their own little accomplice saboteurs there. The pleasers become more of a pleaser because they're like, "Oh God, well, I've got to justify this promotion I've been given." Meanwhile, the victim, on the other hand, is going to probably drop another level in terms of their motivation. And they're going to be even more, deeper in that self-pity kind of pit that they've dug themselves into.
So Jack, we've talked about the 9.
It's a difficult.
We've got the judge there. The judge sits and thinks, "I know who's going to right. I'm going to send this stickler on. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play this stickler."
Yeah.
And people definitely have stronger and weaker connections to these saboteurs, don't they? For instance, I'm not sure my Stickler saboteur has been off the bench that much, whereas the Restless, the hyperachiever, probably a bit of the pleaser, I think they get a lot of time on the pitch in my life. How do people find out who the main players in their life are, though? You mentioned the test. We've both done it. Where do people go? How do they do it?
Yeah, so they probably should have prefaced this whole podcast on the research that's been done, and obviously we haven't done it. So this is all through a book called Positive Intelligence by Shazad Sharmin, which he's gone into this in much more depth, and he also has an online diagnostic tool which you can get on positiveintelligence.com, and as I said, it can kind of take you through the process, and you can really understand kind of what your top 3 pleasers are. It's quite interesting on it because, as you said, and I probably agree with you, that the same kind of 3 or 4 saboteurs, accomplice saboteurs, kind of work together. So it's very unlikely to have kind of an avoider and a pleaser and a victim all kind of tied into one. Obviously not impossible, but generally kind of the same 3 or 4 kind of work hand in hand. So you might have a hyper-rational, hyper-vigilant, and a stickler might be kind of 3 that kind of work together. Whilst, as we said, like an avoider and a high achiever and a restless person, obviously those 3 would probably work quite closely together, running formations if we're carrying on the football analogy here.
Yeah. And of course, you might think, well, why the hell do these saboteurs all exist? And I suppose it's, these things are all good things in moderation, aren't they? There's nothing wrong with being a stickler, as long as it doesn't dominate, as long as it's not who you are. There's nothing wrong with being a pleaser, as long as that's not who you are. So all of these things in balance aren't actually a bad thing, are they? But also, I think it's if you run a team, I think it's worth trying to find out what your team are like. Because if you're putting a stickler in a, I don't know, a fast in and out kind of sales role, they're not chasing the next rush. They're not chasing that bell being rang, and they're going to spend forever making sure that I knows exactly, like, well, that might not be what you need. So it's important that you kind of, if you're building a team, you try and identify these weaknesses, but also try and have a diverse team. Is that a reasonable thing to try and hope for?
No, that's absolutely spot on. As you said, first of all, yeah, there's nothing wrong with having dominant saboteurs, and as long as they don't take over. Like, for example, everyone should have a small amount of hypervigilance in them, because if we weren't anxious about stuff that might happen, then we'd all be walking across railway lines and try and run across the A1 and stuff like that, because we haven't got a care in the world. But yeah, it's obviously really important to have that self-awareness so that you understand, and that you can start addressing some of these issues. But also, yeah, if you're extrapolating this out across a team or across an organization, like, you need to be aware of how your team works, and if you're in a leadership position, like, am I putting the right person into this role based on kind of how they sabotage themselves? Because everyone sabotages themselves a small amount. This is evidence here. But are the sabotages that are prevalent within them kind of manageable within this new role? And as you said, that was a perfectly good example of putting a stickler into a sales position.
And I suppose any good manager, any good team lead, or any good team member, if you've got other people in your team who you care about, I suppose you want the best for them, it's worth trying to get to the bottom of what these things are. Because if I know you're a stickler, and I need to carefully give you an instruction on a job to set the boundaries so your stickler doesn't just run wild, don't I? So I need to say, look, Jack, we've got 5 hours to do this. Don't look at anything below this level. Only go there. Stop when you get there. Because if I don't set those boundaries, I'm enabling your stickler saboteur just to run riot on it. If I let you go 3 days over budget for no reason, that's just as much my fault, isn't it? Especially if I know you're a stickler.
Yeah, and similarly, going and sending a pleaser out to reprice a difficult client, like, you can't expect miracles from them, because you'll end up coming back, either without agreeing anything, or a heavily compromised.
How did it go? The client is over the moon. Thought it was going to be tricky, but he was over the moon. We're doing twice as much for half the fee, and he's going to pay 9 months to. Wasn't the plan. That wasn't the plan at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so listen, Jack. I think I did this test. You've done the test. We both got a lot from it. I would wholly recommend, if you're watching this or listening to this, go to Positive Intelligence.
Intelligence.com.
Fill the test in. Have a look at it. Would love to hear from people who their top 3 saboteurs are. But more importantly, once you've got that, come up with a plan. How are you going to weaken the dominance of those top 3 saboteurs? Because I think that's the point of this, isn't it? Learn where you are self-sabotaging, and then try to do it less.
Yep, self-awareness into self-management.
Good.
That's the key.
Okay, well, as always, we hope you've appreciated this. Hope you found it entertaining, and we look forward to seeing you on the next topic next week. Thanks, Jack.